G'day guys and welcome to Aussie English. My objective here is to teach you guys the English spoken down under. So whether you want to speak like a fair dinkum Aussie, or you just want to understand what the flippin' hell we're on about when we're having a yarn, you've come to the right place. So sit back, grab a cuppa and enjoy Aussie English. G'day guys and welcome to this episode of Aussie English. Here is another expression, another idiom, another phrase that involves animals. And today's phrase involves the animal a bat or bats. And it is to be blind as a bat or to be as blind as a bat. So you don't have to say that first as, you can just say to be blind as a bat, but you can also say to be as blind as a bat. Either's okay. Again, this is the kind of phrase that is used all over the world in English. It's not just Aussie English. It's used by people in England, by people in New Zealand, America, Canada, wherever it is that English is spoken. This is a common phrase you will hear. So, what does to be blind as a bat or to be as blind as a bat mean? This phrase means to have very, very poor eyesight. So, ironically, bats aren't blind, but there is this kind of thought that they can't see because these guys rely on echolocation to capture their prey and to move around at night. I should say that some bats, not all bats, but some bats rely on echolocation. And yes, those that do rely on echolocation have reduced eyesight, but they can still see. But there is a large group of other bats, which are namely fruit bats, for example. There are a lot of those in Australia, and they don't use echolocation and thus have really good vision because they can't navigate through the world using sound, so they have to use their eyes. Anyway, getting sidetracked. So to be blind as a bat, let's explain a few of these words. To be blind means to be unable to see. So if you're unable to see, you're visionless, you're without vision, you're sightless, without sight. You could be visually impaired where you're not necessarily completely blind, but you can't see very well. So that's the word blind. The word bat, it's a mammal, it's a nocturnal mammal. So these guys are mostly active at night. That is what the word nocturnal means. And they're capable of flying. So I'm sure all of you, if you know the story of Dracula, the vampire, will know what a bat is. It's what Dracula turns into and flies away, a vampire bat. So they have membranous wings. They have wings that are like membranes. So a membrane is a very, very thin tissue. So in the case of the bat, it's its skin, a thin membrane that goes from its fingers to its limbs, and it uses this membrane to spread its wings out and be able to fly. And yeah, these guys are really cool. I love them. They're all over Melbourne, both fruit bats and smaller, what we call micro bats in Melbourne that make the sounds what you'll hear out at night. There's a few species that you can hear. And the really, really cool thing about these bats is that you actually can hear when they've caught something. So I love this fact. When they're just trying to navigate around and fly, and avoid running into, well, not running, but flying into trees, they make a more spread out sound of just that kind of spread out sound. But when they finally hear, they actually use this sound to bounce off things and come back to them so they can see around where they're going. When they use this sound and find insects, such as moths or beetles or flies, anything that's flying around, they speed up. So they speed up these sounds, these little, so that they can tell which direction that this animal is moving in, and they can follow it and hunt it down and then grab it with their wings and their legs. And so you'll actually hear these guys make this kind of slow all the way up to speedy sounds, and then suddenly go back to the slow ones again, and that means that they've caught something. So you'll hear like a kind of sound. It's really cool. And so if you hear that, you'll know that there's bats around for one. And secondly, you'll know that they just caught something. So one of them just caught a moth and eaten it and then kept flying away. Anyway, sidetracked again. When would you use this expression? To be as blind as a bat or to be blind as a bat? It's just any time you want to talk about or refer to or mention someone or something that can't see very well or see at all. So you could say, without my glasses, I'm blind as a bat. So it's an exaggeration. You're obviously not blind because you can use glasses. You wouldn't be using the glasses if you were completely blind, but it's to sort of just suggest you can't see very well. So you could also say, my nana's starting to lose her vision. My grandmother, she's starting to lose her vision and she's blind as a bat these days. So let's do some exercises. We'll conjugate these exercises today, guys, to practice these pronouns and conjugate the verbs. The first sentence is going to be, I was blind as a bat, and then I'll conjugate it through. I was blind as a bat. You were blind as a bat. He was blind as a bat. She was blind as a bat. We were blind as a bat. They were blind as a bat. You could probably also say we were as blind as bats or they were as blind as bats. So you make it plural if you want. Both are okay. I don't really see anything weird there. I would understand exactly what you meant. The second example is going to be the sentence, without my glasses, I'm as blind as a bat. And we'll conjugate through that. Without my glasses, I'm as blind as a bat. Without your glasses, you're as blind as a bat. Without his glasses, he's as blind as a bat. Without her glasses, she's as blind as a bat. Without our glasses, we're as blind as bats. Without their glasses, they're as blind as bats. Without our glasses, we're as blind as a bat. Without their glasses, they're as blind as a bat. You'll notice there, guys, when I say he's or she's, and it ends with that s sound before the next word as, I kind of just say he'ses and she'ses. I don't really say as very well. I just kind of swallow it onto the end of he's and she's. So I'll say those again. He's as blind as a bat. She's as blind as a bat. He's as blind as a bat. She's as blind as a bat. So it's a real he'ses, she'ses, she'ses. Just one more thing to practice pronunciation-wise that'll make your fluidity of spoken English improved, and hopefully if you hear people say this kind of stuff and swallow these words, you'll know exactly what they're saying when you hear it. So I hope you've liked this episode, guys. Remember, jump on Facebook, let me know what you think. And if you've been liking these episodes and the podcast in general, then please feel free to leave a review on iTunes because it helps get the podcast out there, find more listeners, and get bigger. And I just want to keep helping you guys as well as other people. So until next time, guys, have a good one. Thanks for listening to the Aussie English podcast, guys. If you haven't already, please come and join the community on Facebook at www.facebook.com/the Aussie English podcast, where I make daily posts about anything and everything related to Australia. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, then please leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher or whichever platform you're listening to it through, as it'll help the podcast grow. Thanks again, guys, and enjoy your day.